For ages now, Tesla's been known as the leader in autonomous driving, and at the same time, we're seeing Apple taking over, providing the most bang for your buck chips with the M1, M1 Pro Max, and all that in recent months. And we're seeing Nvidia and AMD with really strong offerings taking over various sectors and chips, as well as exploding share prices. But Intel is not nearly as far behind as many people think they are, and their valuation is rational, unlike a lot of these other companies. So today we're going to look at some tidbits of news, including big staffing changes, what's going on with Mobileye, as well as some of the news from CES, the Consumer Electronics Show that happened last week. Today I'm going to share with you 4 tidbits of information that show us that these companies should all be fearing what Intel has on the horizon. Check it out. Here we have Jeff Wilcox. It says on his LinkedIn description here, Intel Fellow, Design Engineering Group CTO. It says, I'm pleased to share that I have started a new position as Intel Fellow, Design Engineering Group CTO, Client SoC Architecture at Intel. I could not be more thrilled to be back working with the amazing teams there to help create groundbreaking SoCs. Great things are ahead. So Jeff Wilcox, who originally worked at Intel from 2010 to 2013, helped Apple develop the M1 and T2 security chip, and he was basically the leader of the whole M1 development going on at Apple. He's going to be overseeing the architecture for all of Intel's system on a chip, or SoC designs, and that's really one of the points where people are feeling like Intel has just fallen behind. Even Apple's overtaken you. Apple no longer needs Intel's chips. They're bringing back their super weapon from Apple, and he's excited to do it. The media is also reporting that Apple has been giving out $180,000 bonuses to numerous engineers to keep them on their team from going to the likes of Intel. So Jeff Wilcox was the leader of system architecture, which is much more concerned with how all the different chips talk to each other and work together, not so much in designing the actual processors. He's more looking at the big picture of how to work all these different processors together to do what is required for the application. So what does this mean for both Apple investors and Intel investors? I think, yeah, it's a big loss for Apple, but Apple is not going to, fall apart at the seams or something like that. They have more than enough resources. I think for Intel, on the other hand, this is a really big win because he's experienced, he's put together really capable, amazing bang for your buck processors and hardware. And this is just what Intel needs. Not only the name of Wilcox and his kind of brand, so to speak, but I think it also bodes well for the future of Intel and where the company could end up, even in a year or two, let alone 3, 4, or 5. Now, I've also talked extensively about this in previous videos, but we've seen Intel and Apple basically buying out Taiwan Semiconductor's whole 3 nanometer process orders for this entire year. So a lot of people who say AMD and Nvidia are way ahead of Intel don't really, they're not really paying attention to that factor. And while Intel is going to be leaning on TSMC for the short term to fill that gap and get them up to speed with all the other competition, I think, once what we're seeing with Jeff Wilcox kind of kicks in the coming years, Intel very much could be one of the leaders again. Next, we have Intel launches 12th gen mobile core as quote-unquote the best mobile gaming platform. So we had CES last week. Intel had some impressive presentations, including sharing more about the updated Alder Lake chips. They released the Alder Lake chips late last year in 2021, and the reviews were pretty crazy. Like, people were like, why are these better than a lot of AMD's chips at an equivalent price point? And indeed, a lot of the benchmarks that came out were saying not only are these Intel chips available easily, you can buy them without getting markups, but they're also a better bang for buck than a lot of these AMD Ryzen chips. So while Alder Lake chips already provided great performance for desktops, at CES they announced the P series of Alder Lake chips for performance, quote, thin and light laptops. They're already in full production and should be available on more than 100 different laptop models pretty soon. And Intel's saying that these are the most significant breakthroughs Intel's seen in more than a decade. This chart here shows that Intel claims, at least, better bang for your buck, or I guess performance per watt, than the M1 Max. And they go on in the next slide showing us how they do in the benchmarks. Check it out here. On the top row, we have Adobe Premiere, and on the bottom row, we have Lightroom. I'm not sure why the Apple M1s aren't on the Lightroom comparison. Maybe it's just because they lose on those. But in Premiere, on this Puget benchmark that Adobe offers, shows these new Intels pretty much beating out even the Apple M1 Max with 64 gigs of RAM. Now, I think that very much goes to show that Intel is not out of the race. You know, they're not SoC chips yet. You still need to buy RAM separately and probably a GPU separately and all that stuff. But some of the demonstrations they were doing at CES look pretty impressive, dude. And they also shared about a 5.5 gigahertz desktop chip that should be shipping this quarter. And it looks to be providing really, really impressive performance along with a bunch of other offerings that they had, like not only just in, you know, high power gaming chips and stuff like that. Also really good bang for your buck chips powering numerous other things, including Mobileye, which I'm going to be getting into here in a minute. But yeah, I think this is just another way that while the industry in general has started to forget about Intel, they're showing us that, you know, not only are they not out of this fight, but they're about to land some heavy blows. Next, Intel drops a bomb on the robotaxi industry. You know, for ages now, basically Tesla has been looked at as the industry leader when it comes to autonomous driving. You know, for years now, Musk has been saying we're going to have full level 4 or level 5 autonomous driving by 2020, by 2021, by 2022. And it's not happening. But one of the standpoints that he's been fighting on is, can you get full autonomous driving with just cameras? Whereas a lot of the other manufacturers, including Google's Waymo, are like, no, you need LiDAR and radar and all these systems. And in a lot of ways, you know, LiDAR, like this big heavy box on top of the car, are not actually practical or realistic. Super expensive, super heavy. They're going to make wind noise. They're going to lower your mileage and all this stuff. But, you know, we have level 2, which is like pretty commonplace now. Like pretty much all the German automakers have it. A lot of the Japanese ones have it. Nissan, Honda, Toyota. It's pretty commonplace. Basically, driving on the freeway, it'll go around the curves for you. It'll slow down if the car in front of you is slowing down. It'll stop if it needs to in an emergency. This is level 2. So while it seems like Musk has been the only one fighting for all camera, purely camera, level 2 plus autonomous driving, we've seen actually Mobileye, Intel's it's an Israeli company that Intel bought a few years ago, and actually is going to take public separately, which is a really smart move, I think, later on in this year. They've been doing level 2 plus autonomous driving with a system called Supervision, and it's already in crazy volume production. And because it's in such huge production, it's pretty realistic to consider Intel being one of, if not the leader in autonomous driving technology. But Mobileye announced the world's first level 4 consumer vehicle launching in early 2024. This gives them, probably, assuming Tesla is just going to keep kind of muddling around. Let me get you a picture. Assuming Tesla is not going to have it, this car right here is a Geely, which is a Chinese car and this brand of Zeekrs. They're saying they're going to have the world's first consumer autonomous vehicles by 2024, and it's powered by Mobileye. Now, Mobileye's already shipped more than 100 million units of its more basic IQ unit by the end of 2021. And they're on track to initiate real robotaxis already in Germany and Israel by the end of 2022, by the end of this year. You know, everybody's thinking Tesla will be the first one to do that. And once they do it, it's over. Everybody else is going to be worthless. Why even own another car if Teslas will just be flying all over the place, driving everybody for a really, really cheap price? But it's turning out to not be that, you know, clear cut. And a lot of that, I think, comes down to each state's rules and legislation and stuff like that. But I think actually governments have motivation to not allow Tesla to get that first mover advantage when there are big companies like GM and Ford or Toyota, Honda, Nissan in Japan, who don't have that technology yet. But Mobileye, part of Intel, is making really, really big moves on this front. But going back to what I was saying about the level 4 driving, Mobileye is also planning to get into LiDAR and radar soon, and they'll be aiming to bring the prices down so that it's viable and it doesn't look like that car I showed you a minute ago for mass production kind of in the coming couple of years. And the fourth bit of information for you, you may remember RAM is basically controlled by an oligopoly of companies. One of them, named Micron, who's been doing really well lately, by the way, and I have a video which I'll link up here if you want to check it out and learn more about it, have lost their CFO to Intel. He's going to be making the move this week on the 17th. He'll be moving over, and he'll be reporting directly to Pat Gelsinger, the CEO of Intel. He's going to oversee the company's finance organization, accounting, reporting, tax, treasury, internal audit, and investor relations. And he's taking over for the previous CFO who's just retiring. It's not like, he screwed up and he's getting fired or something like that. But this shows us that Intel has, we've known for years that they have this huge amount of cash. They have all these resources and connections. When are they going to actually use them to catch up or pull ahead of the competition? With this move, pulling over Wilcox, pulling the CFO from Micron, and really heavy investments in new factories and catching up and probably overtaking some of the competition in the coming years, I think if it plays out, it's going to work out really, really handsomely for Intel. And I think Mobileye is going to play a huge part in that because Intel is going to retain majority ownership in Mobileye. If you want to learn more about that Mobileye video, click on this video link right up here. Thank you guys. Stay generous. I love you and see you soon.